Hey Ali, Mike Skeen here from Racers 360. Thank you for sending in your video for us to review. Hopefully we can find you a little bit more time and also help you improve your racecraft a little bit here. We're going to start working through your race video right from the very at the start. One thing I noticed as you're rolling up to the green flag, just looking at this Camaro in your rearview mirror, you're starting to inch up kind of anticipation and you're just kind of running, even with the pace of the Mustang in front of you. I always try to be at least, inching up on the guy ahead of me a little bit before, the zone where I think we're going to get the green. So hopefully that you can have at least a little bit of a run started already. He gets a pretty good little jump on you. Obviously able to maintain going into the banking, which is good. But then as soon as this Mustang starts to slow up going into the banking, I would already be looking for an out. And you kind of fall in right behind him here. It doesn't hurt you too bad, but it could have, especially if the BMW or the Camaro to your outside were a little bit more committed. I think they really could have taken advantage here. So I would keep your options open, already know, where the cars are to your outside so that you can take advantage of any open path that might be over there. So I would have started looking outside a little bit earlier rather than leaving it for this kind of late dive bomb to the inside. Like I said, it worked out in this situation, but I think that outside lane could have, really capitalized if there was somebody out there to commit to it. Obviously, there's a little bit of a traffic jam here and, first lap stuff, but you handle that pretty well. One thing I noticed pretty consistently, though, watching the first few laps is how you really go for these inside, really far inside, late breaking out, maneuvers, which, it's good that you're really strong on the brakes. That's awesome. But a way to better capitalize on that is to be a little bit further outside. You want to be able to control your opponent a little bit. And so when you go really far to the inside, it does a couple of things. One is it makes it really hard for them to see you. So, they could lose you in the mirror, in the side mirror. They don't usually have that wide of a view. So they can lose you, and that can lead to contact. Obviously, it compromises your entry to the corner because now you have a really sharp radius to get around when you get to the corner, so you have to slow it down that much more. But two, it gives your opponent that opportunity to turn in. So what I always try to do is leave, the bare minimum that's reasonable for them, on the outside, if I'm going inside. So leave them a lane and a foot or whatever. And that way you control their position. So, that when you get up alongside of them, you can wait until you are ready to turn in and they have to just hang out there kind of, getting left out to dry. But when you go that far inside, they have, a couple of car widths, a couple of lanes to be able to start their turn in. And then that in turn kind of pinches you down at the apex. And so they're always going to have the better drive off the corner, having the wider outside radius. So, typically if the inside line doesn't get the pass done early, by mid corner, so that you can clear the other car on the way out, that outside gets to run back on the exit. So just try to control your opponent a little bit more on the entry. Just make sure I'm covering all my notes. Right here, I really like the undercut you did. Excellent job. Obviously, make sure that you really get it pointed so that you get that good drive off. That was good. Then you do a nice job being kind of defensive down here, making sure the inside braking zone is covered well. Just going to inch ahead a couple seconds. So when we're coming back onto the banking at the front, you let the Porsche have the inside lane, which I would try to cover that. As soon as we start coming up on the banking, I would stay down at the bottom lane. I don't think it really would have played, a factor here since he has enough power to get all the way clear of you before the banking. But just something to keep in mind, being a little defensive on the front side. We're going to skip ahead again to 435. And also, this is just another comment on one of those inside-out braking maneuvers. So now you're going for a pass, basically on two cars. Definitely, going for the Porsche because you're so far inside. Those guys don't know where you're going, and so it ends up that you can't control their pass because you've gone so far inside. So they can stay outside. Now you're both, all three of you are kind of offline and compromised going through the chicane there. and it kind of continues to play out. But the idea again is that you want to be able to control the opponent. So trying to make sure that you have positioning to where you can get inside them, just barely inside of them, rather than a couple lanes to the inside like you are now. Especially when you have a really wide break zone like this, you really want to be basically on this line, just maybe even a little to the right of it, to be able to control those guys the outside. But right here especially, I would have really only tried to go for the pass on the Porsche. You're really too far back to make up that much ground all the way to the Evo and be able to control their line going through the apex. So be a little bit more smart so that you can complete the pass and get the good run off the corner, so that they don't repass you back when you leave. Jump ahead again. There were a couple of these back and forth, several times at turn 9 where you went inside the Porsche. So here you go for that late inside, really far inside. The other thing I want to point out is the angle of attack that you end up with a lot of these corners, and we couldn't really see it well back at turn 3, but here at turn 9 you can really see. I know you're not really going for the pass on the Evo at this point, but the differences in the angle of your lines leaves you in a really high risk, high consequence. Because if you miss that break zone just a little bit, or if the Evo hadn't opened his line to give you a few extra feet right here, you can very easily end up in contact, probably putting you at fault, depending on, the penalties for your organization at the time. But the really big thing, again, is making sure that you're very clear with your moves and that you don't leave any extra room. So you didn't really have to go all the way this far to the inside in order to get that pass on the Porsche, and you actually would have been better off because you would have held them out for making their turn in way too late, so they could try to because you went as far deep and gave them as much room as you did. Now that you can see in the rearview mirror that Porsche, you also get a little bit of oversteer there, so now you've got the drag race on your hands. Again, trying to make smart moves to where you control that pass on the way into the corner. You make sure it's complete by the middle. You're nice and tidy so that you get a good drive off the corner, and you're not allowing that competition to get a second run. Here we go again. This one I think the Porsche kind of gave you, to be honest. Pretty late, outbraking maneuver and pretty far to the inside. So again, your angle of attack was such that you really had to slow down for the entry speed, and knew that was a tight section, so they'd try to get you on the front straightaway again. Fortunately here you get a really nice run, so you start to clear the Porsche a little bit. You get a little bit of traffic up here, which helps push them way down the inside. You can kind of hang on the outside lane here. Keep it strong all the way down to turn 3. You're getting nice and deep on the brakes, so obviously you're making up good time on the brakes, but we need to use that smart to our advantage. And so you see here, you get a good run, a little bit of oversteer, so that hurt a little bit of the exit speed, but you get that really good run so that you're close, and then you make a nice, real deep brake, and your angle of attack is a little bit closer, so you're not all the way down the inside. Your entry line is less compromised now, still roll pretty good speed through the middle of the corner, and you get all the way down to that late apex so that you get a good drive off the corner. So this is a fairly well executed pass. You don't allow your competition to get another run back at you on the exit, and so this is where you start to clear them and go on your merry way. And obviously here we want to, as soon as we make a pass, make sure we're hitting all our marks. So you're a little bit deep there in turn 9. Fortunately, it didn't really hurt you, but it's really important, especially when you're battling somebody and you've finally gotten past them. You got to hit your marks. That's when you got to run your absolute most perfect lap to make sure you start gapping them. Especially if they have more horsepower on you, you want to make sure that you can get enough of a gap in all the corners so that you can start to pull away before you get to any more straights. All right. Let's skip ahead a bit since that's through most of our racecraft stuff. I'm going to skip to about 10 minutes. So this is coming, you're all by yourself now. You've got a stock car and a few lap cars that are 10 or 15 car lengths back coming out of the banking, going into turn 3. my first note was, why'd you go defensive here? You go really far down the inside. I see after watching a few more, that's kind of, your typical line. You break pretty far, kind of straight towards the apex there. Really late breaking, but really tight line on the apex. So, one thing I'd tell you to be mindful of is how much you try to sacrifice the entry of the corner for that late breaking. You do it at turn 9 a lot too, where you kind of start crabbing in a little bit, and you give up space to the outside. It's great to be really late on the brakes, but we don't want to do it so much that we're sacrificing mid corner and entry speed a lot. A little bit here at turn 5 also, where a lot of times you're really late on the brakes and you're a little bit off of that first X. You get it rotated and back to 6, but we want to make sure that if we're braking really deep, it's kind of trail braking in so that our mid corner speed is actually kind of halfway between the 5 and 6 apexes. So you can see, well, it's kind of off in the dirt now with that car going off, but the cone over there, which is actually right there by that access road, pretty good to turn in. So if you start that really early with kind of slow hands turn in, you can break on a diagonal and kind of make a V out of this double apex hairpin. That'll get you more entry speed, but also move your minimum speed later in the corner rather than being kind of early by that first apex. It'll make it more halfway between the two so that you can kind of have a lot of speed in, still rotate the car and get back to power without any real coast period in the middle there. Skip ahead again to my next note. It's just another note about crabbing in too early and kind of looking for passes from way too far back. Obviously, you didn't really go for it, but you're kind of looking for it. And I would just recommend that you stay online, stick to your line so you know that you're really close enough to start making a pass. It didn't really hurt you in that case, but a lot of times I see guys coming from a long way back, and maybe they're not even really intending to make a pass, but it's different when you're passing out of class cars versus in class. Sometimes it's good to show the nose to a guy in class to, kind of distract him or try to get him to move offline and open the door a little bit. But with out of class cars, I really recommend staying perfectly in line until you're ready to go for a pass, because if you start to show the nose from too far back, it's not realistic for you to make it, but that distracts the guy and maybe then makes you guys both go too wide through a corner, which slows you both down. Whereas if you stay right in the middle behind them until you're absolutely sure you're ready to go for that pass, they can kind of say, all right, he's still straight behind me, he's not going to pop it out, and if he does pop out to a side mirror, then I know he's going for it, and you can make the pass happen quicker rather than kind of having this ambiguity and miscommunication between cars where it can lead to you going side by side for a while and slowing you both down. All right, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and just talk about more stuff that can produce lap time and whatever. This is 17 minutes in lap 10 going through the banking. Just watching your minimum speed, 139, maybe, blips down to 36, 37, maybe right in the middle, but pretty quickly back up in the 140s. And that's quite a bit higher than most of the time through turn 1 and 2. Most of the time, your minimum speeds have been maybe 130, low 130s, even some high 128s, 120s, So I would encourage you to try to build up more and more speed through 1 and 2. It looks to me like you're generally not using all the width of the road through there. There's a little bit, I know it's a kind of intimidating corner sometimes, but it looks to me like there might be a little bit more room there. Even if you manage to stay full throttle all the way through it, just opening that radius can really minimize the scrub and let you carry as much speed through there as possible. Just a little bit later, I think on the same lap here, going down to turn 9. So we go through the little chicane. I think this is your best run through here. You get out pretty wide on the entry, nice and tighty. Get it to the apex, good rotation, nice and smooth on the power, no oversteer. So that's really good run through there. I would still say we want to be a little bit out more to the left. So when I start, I want to be a little bit closer to the left, but certainly by the time I'm getting down towards this turn in And, really before this last cone, closer to the one just before it. So about the time we're getting to these double cones over here, I want to have the car pretty close to the left side, and you're still roughly middle. And so you go past that single one, and they kind of have a turn-in cone, and you really never get out all the way into that outside lane. You're kind of left of the middle lane, and so that's still sacrificing a little bit of the entry line and keeping that radius a little bit too tight. I would just suggest being a little bit wider, making sure you're opening that radius as much as possible, and definitely focusing on exit speed. A lot of times, you're even much more inside than this, and it's obviously in many cases much more dirty over there. I know you're trying to straighten up and be as hard as you can on the brakes, but you can also still be very straight, but a little bit more to the left under your braking, so that when you're done with your brakes, you're pretty much all the way out there to the edge of the road, opening that radius up a little bit. Looking at the last of my notes. Yeah, pretty much covered it. So definitely, like I said, as far as racecraft stuff, working on how you present yourself to the car, but whether it's an in-class car that you're battling for a position or an out-of-class car, don't go all the way down to the inside. Even if you're trying to get to the inside, now break somebody, you also, you don't have to knock their mirror off, but you want to stay close enough to them that you can control their position a little bit more. It becomes much more ambiguous, and it's much more likely to have a contact situation where they, lose you in the mirrors and then turn down on you if you go way down to the inside where you're not visible. So staying up next to somebody keeps you visible to them. Also, you get the benefit of controlling their position a little bit. You get to keep them from turning in, and you also don't sacrifice your entry radius quite as much. So definitely consider that. And also, even, you're doing a lot of that crabbing in under braking, even when you're all by yourself, especially turns 9, 3, 5. Don't sacrifice that entry too much. Get that straight line braking done, and then right at the end, as you start that kind of slow hands turn in, start releasing the brake pressure and let it roll in. But you'll get a lot wider radius to the corner if you don't just beeline it to the apex under braking. So work on those things a little bit. Little stuff like, when you're going by lap traffic on the banking, using draft a little bit more. Like here, came out into the oval, a little behind that Acura, and then you've got this other Honda or something up there. There's good few 10 seconds or something. You could have stayed behind them. Not much, but it's worth something. And then, like I said, trying to maintain a little bit more speed through the banking, starting up a little bit higher, getting all the way down to the bottom. Use the full radius. Even though it's a really big corner, we want to try to open it up and minimize the tire scrub as much as possible. So hopefully that stuff you can find helpful. Definitely, the racecraft stuff can be tricky, but hopefully that can be applicable for you as well. So let us know how it goes. Hopefully we'll get you some better results next time.